Hey, so in this video I'm going to be teaching you guys how to make chemigrams, but chemigrams just using plant-based chemistry rather than your traditional chemistry developer and fixer. So if you haven't already made plant-based chemistry, then you can see how to make this in my previous video, which demonstrates how to develop your films with plant-based chemistry. In that video, I take you through making your own plant-based chemistry, which can then all be used across your paper and your film development. So this workshop, we're then using that chemistry to do an alternative and more experimentational form of photography called chemigrams. Chemigrams was invented by a French artist called Pierre Cordier. It was said that he was kind of playing around in the dark room and wanted to make a birthday card for a friend, and so painted with some nail varnish on a piece of paper before developing it, the name of his friend or a birthday wish. And it was through this understanding of kind of preventing areas of the paper from developing that he realized he could manipulate this more and use more and different forms of resists being things that stick and adhere to the paper and prevent their development. So he researched and worked with this technique really extensively. You can look up some of his works online. I'm going to take you through some of the techniques that I like to use, some materials that I like to play around with, and all using plant-based chemistry. So, first off, you're going to need some black and white, or colour actually. You can work with colour paper too. But I've got just some black and white, old, expired silver gelatin paper. In general, I prefer to work with fibre-based paper because it can be recycled much more easily, whereas resin-coated, because it's covered in a layer of plastic, it can't actually be recycled. So on the whole, I always buy fibre-based, but this was kind of salvaged from somewhere where it was going to go to waste. So that's where I've got some resin-coated paper today. When I'm testing things out also, there's no need to work with a whole sheet of paper at a time. So I've got out a few sheets here. We're working with it in the light rather than in the dark room. So it doesn't matter if the paper is out of date or fogged or, ruined in conventional photography terms. So I've got out a few sheets and I'm just going to cut them up into a smaller size so that we're not using a whole sheet to test with. Alright, so once you've got some smaller sheets of paper, or you might be working with small paper to begin with anyway, we're just kind of going to work with one at a time, leave the others like upside down or under a book or something, just so they're not absorbing light that whole time. And then here, this is my plant-based developer that I made earlier when I was developing a film. This is my fixative. This is conventional fixative, but I'll also be working with a salt-based fixative. And then essentially we're just going to experiment with applying different things to the paper that prevent or allow the developer or the fix to react with the paper. So you'll also find that different things in your cupboards, you know, you really don't need to buy anything fancy for this workshop. Anything that you find around the house in your kitchen cupboards, you'll find can be used. So you just want to think about things that will stick to the paper. So one thing that we're going to try out to start with, and we're going to leave to dry for a bit actually, is some gum arabic. A lot of artists use this for kind of like making dyes or making glues. If you don't have gum arabic, anything that you can make a paste with that will stick will work. So something like flour and water you could use. You don't need very much. So I'm just going to put a tiny bit in a bowl there. And then I'm just going to get some water and give it a mix. And this will create a kind of paste. So you'll see, I'm only using such a small amount, but that's because at this stage we're just figuring out like what all of the different materials that we've got around us today are going to do and how they're going to work with the paper. And then from there, once you start to kind of understand how things work with the paper and how the different chemicals react and the colours they give and the textures you can create, then you can really start to understand how you're going to work that around the image that you want to create. So with this, I've got a few options for applying it. I've got a paintbrush in my hand, I could paint it on, or I could kind of try and dab it on. It depends what look I'm going for. So in this case, I don't really want to have paintbrush marks on my piece of paper, I think. So I'm going to just kind of try and dip this into the bowl. So then we've got some kind of organic form going on there, which I'm just going to leave on the side to dry. So as I said, gum arabic is quite a gluey texture, and so as we leave it on the side, it should kind of start to set. And then once it's set, or once it's got to a stage that I think is quite interesting, then I'm going to introduce the developer and the fixer to change the tone of the paper. So next we're going to think a bit about applying these chemicals to your paper surface. So as I was talking about earlier with the paintbrush, you can either use a paintbrush or you can, dip things. You can also spray things, which is really interesting. So if you have an old spray bottle around, it's a really great tool to have. And you could just simply pour some of your developer in your spray bottle. I'm gonna undo. So a little bit of my plant-based developer. And then I'll do this on the table for you all to see. I'm working on a table that I'm not very precious about, but if you're, obviously on a precious wood table, then I wouldn't advise just spraying chemicals directly onto it. Definitely work in trays, in old food tubs that you're not going to use for food, or on newspaper, cardboard, something to protect the surface. So now if I'm just to spray lightly onto my paper, we'll slowly see that the developer will start to react with the paper, but it will only develop where it's hit. It might take a few minutes, but you can see it now. The blacks are starting to form, and it's giving us quite an astral image, and slowly different areas will begin to emerge as the developer slowly reacts with the paper. So it might be as simple as that, 3 sprays onto some paper, and that's all we want. If that's at the stage where you're happy with it, then you need to make the decision whether you want to fix it. If you fix it, you're going to remove all of the areas which haven't been developed. So any area at the moment which is not black will go white. So I'll do that as an example, but then I'll also do an example where I'm going to leave it and not fix it, so you can see the difference. So I'll just make another one. So this one I'm going to leave out, and this one here that I did a little bit earlier, I'm going to fix. So always remember which tray is your fixative. So it might be helpful to write on them in markers, because especially if, like me, you're using trays which all look the same. So now, if I'm at the stage where this is developed enough, I'm just going to pop that into my fixer. And you'll see now that it's removing all of the background colour, and it's just leaving us with a white background. So that is the work of the fixative, removing all of the undeveloped silver halides. So continuous agitation. For 3 or 4 minutes. So now we'll move on to another form of applying the chemistry to the paper. So essentially, I mean, you can be really creative with applying it. You can use anything you have around your house, like an old rag or anything you can, like kitchen utensils. Here I've got an old cloth. So what I could do here is, the texture of the cloth might give me quite an interesting effect. So I'm just going to dip some of it into this developer. And then I'm kind of just going to sponge it on. And then we'll see, again, because we're applying such a small amount to the paper, it will take a few seconds for it to develop. So once you do a dab, you have to be patient. Just because you don't see the results straight away, it doesn't mean that it's not on there. You just need to wait, see how it affects, see how it reacts, see how it develops, and then decide if you want to add more. If I would just dab all over that, then you'd see that, you would lose the effect, because the whole thing would then just go black and would become developed. So again, with this one, we can decide whether we want to fix it and allow the background to go white, or whether we want to leave it to continue absorbing light. You might decide, I really like this blue colour, I want to keep that, but unfortunately the blue will continue to absorb light, and you see this one only has a corner of blue there left now, and the rest of it has gone purple. Over time, depending on what type of paper it is, this will continue to darken slightly and will often go to a kind of browny or dark purple hue. Lots of people quite like this in their work. I also use it quite often, but if you're thinking that you might be able to keep this blue colour, unfortunately that's that's not really possible. But you can scan it at this stage, and then you can see kind of the color change as the image continues absorbing light and keeps evolving. So I'll do, again, like that one, I'll just do another one and I'll fix it so that you can see the difference. So I think this process is quite akin to painting or like mark making, because you're really like thinking about your application and your surface, and it's a very different way of working to taking a photograph. You can't see what the result is going to be. It's very much about understanding the materials you're working with and allowing time for things to evolve. I think time is a really important factor in these processes, and it's essential to not try and rush them and to just enjoy the pace that they take, and enjoy the process, because through that then you'll really start to appreciate and understand the materials and the nuances of them. So this one I'll leave for a few more minutes. I'm just going to decide if I want to fix which one of these I want to fix. I think I'm going to leave this one and I'm going to fix this one. So I can use the same fixer. It's still perfectly good. You can keep using fixer until it's fully exhausted. When it's fully exhausted, it will just stop fixing the images and you'll see a residue of silver sulfate start to form on the bottom of your tray. If been in the fix for 4 minutes or so, you then need to wash them. If you don't wash them, fix is quite a salty solution, and so you might get kind of salt dusting on your prints. So it's always important to give them a good wash. So this is just going to be my washing container, and I'll use this now to wash all my prints after they've been fixed. So the next form of application we're going to think about is tapes. So this can be any sort of tape that you have around the house. I've got some masking tape here, but it could be electrical tape, it could be wrapping tape, whatever you have really. But again, basically the tape is going to prevent certain areas from developing or fixing. So you can kind of think of drawing with the tape or mark making with the tape. Something I really like doing is introducing lines into the tape. So I'll just get a piece of paper. So that could be through lint on your fabric is a really good example, or you could put string throughout it. In this example, I'll just do the tape as it is, and I'm just going to put a few pieces onto my paper here. When you're adding it, try not to overlap it too much, because that will make it hard for the tape to peel off. So if you're doing a block and you want to add tape side by side, just make sure there's a little line in between the tape where the developer or fixer can kind of get underneath, because that's what's going to create your interesting marks. Okay, so now I've got some tape on. I need to decide what colour I want the background to be of my paper. If I want it to be dark and black, then I would put it in the developer first. But if I want it to be white, then I'll put it in the fixer first. So I'm going to have ready my tray of fixer here, and then I'm going to do another tray with my developer. Just put a bit in. And then I'm going to go with the white background first, so I'm going to put this directly in the fix. And you'll see that it's only fixing the areas where the tape isn't. I'm not going to agitate it too much because masking tape lifts quite easily, but if you're using a stronger tape, you can agitate that more without worrying about it lifting up. I can see that already the chemistry is starting to get underneath the tape, so therefore I'm going to take it out my fix, even though the background hasn't fully fixed. Now I'm going to wash it in my water between putting it in the developer and the fix. It's really important to do this because otherwise it will make your developer and your fix very ineffective. Because they'd have different chemistry pHs. And so by adding one to the other, you're basically kind of neutralizing them, making them not very effective. So I'll just wash it off. And then I'm going to put it in the developer. And what the developer is going to do is it's going to help to lift that tape and then develop the areas that the fix hasn't touched. But anywhere where the fix has touched, so all around here where there's no tape, is going to stay white because the fix has fixed it. That's it. There's no going back. But you'll see, because it wasn't in the fix for the full amount of time, there might be some kind of overlap, and we might get some browning effects either under the tape or around the edges of the paper where it hasn't quite finished fixing, and therefore the developer starts to react. So now we'll start to see the tape lifting a bit and black starting to form under there where the developer is coming into contact with the paper. Now here I could choose to wash the print again and then put it back in the fix, and then we just have really minimal kind of black lines. I'm going to let it develop a little bit more, or I could let it develop all the way, but I'm just going to let it develop a tiny bit more, and then I'm going to put it back in the fix again. So I'm going for quite a minimal white base image. When working with chemigrams, you'll really quickly realize that it's almost impossible to repeat yourself. Every chemistry, every appliance, every way of putting things on the paper reacts differently every time, and different results come out. And usually if you try too hard to repeat your results, then you'll get completely the opposite of what you want, and you won't be happy. So it's always easiest just to go in with a very kind of experimental and open mindset of what you want to achieve and how the materials are going to react, because otherwise you'll probably be disappointed. So I'm going to wash this again before putting it into the fix for a last time. When I'm putting it in the fix, I know that I want everything else to be white. So at this point, I'm just going to peel the paper off with my fingers. But if you wanted this banding to continue happening, then you wouldn't peel it off with your fingers. You would just let the chemistry slowly wash it off while going between the fix, the water, and the developer. So you can get some really beautiful kind of marbling patterns you see here, and this will vary with every kind of tape you're using and with the paper you're using as well, and all sorts of things. Again, I said if you're using a much stronger tape, you might find that you're moving it between the chemistry for a really long time and you're losing your patience. So in that case, I recommend kind of detacking it a bit, so reducing the stickiness. You can do that by just, when you peel the tape up, just rubbing it along some clothes, a woolly jumper, and that will just pick up some fibres and allow the chemistry to seep in and get under the tape a bit quicker. Because otherwise, I especially wouldn't recommend using something like duct tape, which is going to really stick to your paper, because you could be there for hours. So I'm going to just leave that to finish fixing for a bit. And then we can move on to, I've got one last kind of resist, if you want, which is a candle. So again, a candle is just going to block out certain areas of the paper for developing with the wax. So if you've got fibre-based paper, it's really nice because you can actually just use the bottom of the candle as a kind of drawing implement. It doesn't work quite as well on resin-coated because it doesn't stick to the surface as well. Resin-coated is quite glossy. So you can either draw with it, or the alternative is to light it. And then just use the dripping wax So as that wax dries, it's now just going to prevent those areas from developing. So then, like the previous one, I need to decide whether I want the background to be white, in which case I would put it straight in the fixer first, or whether I want the background to be black, in which case I would put it straight in the developer first. So because I did fix first for the last one, with this one I'll put it straight in the developer so that you can see the difference. You can see actually even with this resin coated paper, the drawing with the wax still worked really effectively and has adhered to the paper. So I might decide that I don't want it, completely developed. I just want a slight development, which is looking quite interesting in this one. So therefore, I'm just going to take that out at this point, and then give it a wash. And then after I've washed it, I will fix it again. Just, it's always good to, unless you're leaving your prints without any chemistry, like some of these ones I demonstrated earlier, it's always good to finish with fixing your prints, just so you know that they're not going to continue to change with the light. So I'll give it a wash. And then I'm going to put it in the fix. So again, I'm agitating this one just to make sure that the fix covers the whole surface of the paper. And what's really interesting here is you can actually see, which is quite an unexpected result, even though I've worked with hundreds of chemigrams, that the wax has actually sped up the development process where I've drawn with it. And where I've drawn with the wax, we've got a more intense black. So rather than blocking out the development, on this occasion it's actually sped up the development. So we've got a darker line where I've drawn with the wax, but where I've just melted the wax, it will be completely clear underneath, and we can actually peel those off now, and they will then, once we peel them off, then they can be fixed, unless you want wax to be on your final piece, which you might choose from a style aesthetic perspective. I'm going to take mine off, and then I'm just going to finish fixing it. So a few of the melted wax pellets shifted while they were in the developer, so this one here and this one, and that's why we've got those interesting kind of black halos going on around them. So I'll leave those for a few more minutes, and then we can put them in water for a final wash. Next, we're going to think a bit about other chemistry other than our traditional developer and fix, even though it's not traditional developer, it's plant-based developer. You can also just use other kind of condiments or cleaning products or other things lying around your house, and you'll find that they will also react with your photographic paper. The best thing really is to just get things out your cupboard and try applying things to paper and seeing what comes out. A couple of things I've got today are lemon juice, so the acid reacts quite well. I've also got vinegar, which is a really similar pH to lemon juice, so they react in quite a similar way. And then I've got some salt and I've got some cooking wine. But again, like I said, you can be much more... I'm in a studio which doesn't have an extensive kitchen food cupboard, but if I was, then you could get out your Marmites, you could get out different oils. All of these can be used and experimented with just to see what colour they turn the paper. So to start with, you might just want to do quite a simple, almost like swatch test. So first up, this is the wine. I'm just going to do a little swab. Might take some time as well for it to react. It won't be a really quick reaction. Then I'm going to do some lemon juice. I'll just pour a bit in, like that. Smelling nice already, lemon and wine. And then I'm going to do some vinegar, just again a little. And so we can again just leave these for a bit to just see how they're going to react. We could also do anything else really that you've got around. So over here in my bowl, I just washed my paintbrush. So this is just a mixture of clay, and then also had some gum arabic in the bottom. This also might react. It's very much just worth testing out, like any waste solutions or waste products that you have around the house. Just try them and see what they're going to do, because you never really know. So then lastly, I'm going to do a little swab of that. And then we'll leave that and see how they go. So it might be that if I really like the tone that these give the paper, then I might choose to use one of these techniques that I demonstrated earlier. But then instead of having the white or black background, I might choose to put it in one of these other things. I might choose to put it in lemon juice, or I might choose to put it in cooking wine or in the vinegar or in a salt solution, whatever you've got really. So then once you're kind of understanding more how different things can react, we can also think about other things that you have in the cupboard to react as a resist again. So like earlier I was using the tape, we can also use things like glues, like the gum arabic that I did earlier. That's drying quite nicely now, and it's actually almost like cracking on the surface of the paper. It's quite hard to see, but I think that's basically, I can then, a bit like if it was a varnish, I can then crack that surface, and then in those cracks I can influence what chemicals get affected by it. So I might use that now to demonstrate. So I'm going to put this first into my developer. And as I said earlier, I could have painted this gum arabic on, or it could be that I'm working with a different type of varnish. But again, it's something that sets and can then crack. So it could be a nail varnish, it could be a floor varnish, or it could even be something like maple syrup or honey golden syrup. So we've got this really interesting kind of almost fetus shape forming on the paper here, which is why I wanted to not paint it on, and I wanted to just apply it directly from the bowl onto the paper, because if I painted it on I would have had the brush strokes, which can be also a really interesting effect to work with, but generally within my work I prefer not to see the kind of man's hand in the work. I prefer it to take on a more organic form. So then with this, I'm just going to take it out, and I'm going to give it a wash. And then I'm going to just try, once it's washed, I'm just going to try kind of cracking that varnish layer a bit more, so that to allow the chemicals to seep more in there. But actually what I can feel now is that by being in the liquid, it's softened, so that varnish is sticky again. So what I could do is I could leave it to dry again and then do this process again, crack it, or I could just wipe it off at this point and allow that whole area to fix. I think this form is quite interesting, so I'm going to wipe it off just in the water. Just going to rub it off there. It's just coming off quite easily. And then I'm going to put this into the fix. So our other two images have been in the fix a little while, so I can remove those. And just remove those from underneath. So you can see the different, the really varied and different effects that we're able to get just using simple household resists and chemicals. So while that one's fixing, we can come back over here to our household chemistry. We can see, I mean, it's very subtle reactions, but this was the lemon here, and the lemon has gone a much more kind of pale tone compared to the vinegar. or even this was the wine actually, and then this was the vinegar. So it's very subtle hues, quite pastel-y colours. I'm just going to kind of mix these about a bit. And then I'm just going to leave them on the side to continue to react with the paper. Then finally, I've pretty much gone through everything I wanted to, but finally I'm just going to go back to these clay ones which we did quite early on. So it's often quite nice with the clay ones, or with any other material that might work in a similar way, where you can push it between the paper, is you can then put them in different chemistry and have quite a direct comparison for how different results might turn out. So I could either put this in one of my natural chemistries, but as I haven't got a bath of one of those going at the moment, I'm just going to put one in my plant-based developer and one in my fix. So I'll put them alongside each other. This over here, just to remind you guys, is just my water. So I'll just agitate those, and that will help to release the clay. And then, because if you remember at the beginning, we actually were putting clay in the developer, I don't want to develop this one too much, because otherwise we're going to lose the effect of the developer in the clay. So I'm going to take that out quite promptly, and then just put it to wash. And then our one in the fix, you can see that the developer has been reacting, but very, very subtly, because the amount of developer that's in there is so dilute that it's only giving us this very light grey tone. So I can just choose now to help get this clay off if I want. Then we can start to see a bit more of the effect. So then from there, I can finish fixing it so that I know that the tone is not going to change, or I could take it out now and know that it will continue to keep absorbing light. This one here, let's remove some of the clay again so that we can see in the water what's going on. So we can see that some areas have developed really strongly, but other areas, actually, the developer hasn't been very present in the clay, which is why we've got this white area. So if I want to keep that white, then I need to fix it, because none of this has been fixed yet. So I'm going to do that. So because it was in water, I can just now put it straight in my fix. I'm going to leave those to fix a bit more, and then I'm going to give everything a final wash, because this water that I've been washing everything here in has got quite dirty now, and so it's not good to just take the prints out of there as a finished product. So I'm just going to get myself a new water bath. I'm going to transfer these prints that were sat in the dirty water, just get the clay off them first so I'm not contaminating the fresh water too much. Put them in there, and then I'm just going to leave them all in the water for 10-15 minutes or so, because I want to make sure they have a good wash. And then you might have noticed, but these ones that we did early at the beginning, we chose not to put in any chemistry, but I could choose to wash them anyway. Washing them will change the tone of them. I'll wash one, and leave the other. So that's all my prints from today. I'll just give them a quick wash and then I'll get them all out so that you can see the full array of different techniques that I've demonstrated in this workshop. So I just laid out all the prints that we covered over this workshop for you guys to see, so that you can see the array of different techniques, methods of application, chemicals that we covered. This one's doing some quite interesting things now actually, but as I was talking about earlier, it is a slow process and you really need to wait for the chemistry, to wait to see what it's going to do. But this was the one where I added all natural chemicals which weren't developers or fixers. So it was lemon juice, vinegar, and cooking wine, and then some clay and gum Arabic water. And it's getting some really interesting highlights, and I'm actually just going to leave that one to continue reacting with the chemicals, possibly for up to 24 hours until it's completely dried out. And then we might even find that if the solutions are salty, you might get some really interesting crystallization forming around it. And I tend to not wash that off. I find that part of the work, it becomes a landscape in itself, and more of a 3D object rather than your traditional flat photography. So I hope that was useful for you guys. Let me know if you have any questions or any suggestions. And that's everything. Bye.